SEP Fanfic Readings presents Finding Hermione by ebookdragon. Chapter 16. Let's talk about November 25th through the 30th.
She called me Daddy, Draco announced. Kinky, drawled Theo. What? Asked Draco. Then realization dawned. Not Hermione, you perv. Rose. They were in the cafe in Muggle London for lunch. It was the first time since September that Hermione hadn't joined him for lunch. He liked Theo's company, but he really missed Hermione. He noticed the uncomfortable chairs and the overly flirtatious waitresses more without her presence, that always managed to drown out the small annoyances of life. It was strange, but he didn't mind all that before Hermione came into his life. Congrats. How does Hermione feel about that? Theo asked. Draco took a sip of his wine before he answered. She seems fine with it. Made sure to inform me that I have to share. Rose picked the worst time to make her announcement, though. Oh? Theo asked. We went to the burrow to talk to the weasel about visitation for the girls. Rose refused to hug him. Molly tried getting her to hug him. She announced to everyone that I was her daddy, not Weasley. I imagine he took that well. Not at all. Surprisingly, no one else really voiced any objections. The kids are coming home from school soon. How's Minerva going to react to all of this? It's anyone's guess at this point, Draco said. He sat eating his salad, musing about Hermione's oldest daughter. He worried that she would feel left out. He was going to teach her to fly, so that would give them some time to hopefully bond. She knew that he was in love with her mother, though, and she took that well enough. So, have you two consummated this unholy union yet? Theo asked, startling Draco out of his musings. What? Draco asked automatically. Then his brain caught up to what Theo said. Theo was smirking at him across the table. No, we haven't. Really? I expected you to have pounded her into that new desk you got for her. After Hermione's grand exit from the Ministry of Magic, Draco had presented her with a new desk for the both of them in the study. It was called a partner's desk. The thing was as large as a billiards table in dark walnut. They could sit on opposite sides of the desk, working together, but with their own space. If he was honest, it had featured in a few of his early morning fantasies recently. Not that he was going to be as crass as Theo about it. I'm a little concerned about how much thought you've put into our sex lives. Theo shrugged, nonchalantly. What are friends for, if not to be incredibly intrusive? Are you saving yourself for marriage or something? Funny. No, it's nothing like that. Afraid you're going to blow your top in like 3 minutes? It's understandable. His incredibly intrusive friend persisted. Who needed enemies when you had friends like this to boost your self-esteem? I'm not a teenager, Theo. I've learned a little self-control over the years. Well, then what is it? It's not like the two of you don't have plenty of opportunities. She lives in your house with you. Draco leveled a glare at his friend's persistent involvement in his sex life. That is kind of the reason, he admitted. This is the only woman I'm ever going to have sex with for the rest of my life. I don't want our first time to just be an ordinary day. I want it to be something we'll always remember. There's nothing special about falling into bed together because it's a Tuesday and they got carried away with the heavy petting. Hermione deserved better. She deserved flowers and candles. She deserved to be worshipped. Theo rolled his eyes at Draco. You're such a girl. It will definitely be memorable for her when you blow after 3 minutes. Seriously, Theo. I'm not 15 anymore, and that happened once. Damn Pansy for telling Daphne and Tracy about the one and only time they'd had sex. The girls had immediately told Theo and Blaze, who were all sympathy and advice. Not. He'd been getting ribbed for it ever since. You know there's this thing you can do with your tongue, Theo persisted. Stop, Draco interjected, not wanting to continue this discussion about his sex life anymore. I don't need sex advice, Theo. Seriously, though, it works every time. Draco wanted to pound his head into the table. Only good breeding and not wanting to cause a scene in the cafe stopped him. The waitress sashayed over to their table. A quick glance at her revealed that the top buttons of her blouse had mysteriously come undone during their lunch in her section. He handed her his credit card without waiting for her to hand him the bill. The quicker they got out of here, the better. He had a feeling she would somehow trip and manage to fall in his lap if they stayed much longer. He seriously hated that shit. Next time he went anywhere without Hermione, he was moving his signet ring to his left hand. At least that would keep some of them off of him. The waitress returned with his bill and credit card receipts to sign. Sure enough, on one copy was her phone number. Not that he owned a phone or was going to use it, but he knew enough of Muggle technology to know what the series of digits meant. It wasn't the first time a woman tried to slip him her digits. He left a tip and signed the slip, leaving the number in the folder. He and Theo escaped the cafe, Theo laughing behind him as Draco hastily made his way out of the cafe. Draco hurried home from the ministry. He couldn't wait to see Hermione and Rose. He was anxious all day, not having her in the same building anymore. He flew home from the ministry and stepped into his drawing room, brushing ash off of his shoulders. "Daddy!" his little red-headed princess screeched, running across the room to greet him. He dropped his briefcase on the floor and scooped the little girl up in his arms. "Hello, princess. Did you have a good day?" Draco gave his mother a peck on her proffered cheek and kissed Hermione tenderly before sitting beside her on the couch and setting Rose in his lap. Rose chattered away about her day. "When did that happen?" he heard his mother ask Hermione quietly. "Sunday, at the Barrow," Hermione whispered back. He caught a peek at his mother out of the corner of his eye and saw her quirk her lips in a small smile. He could practically see the wheels turning in his mother's head. He had a feeling that their wedding was being planned as she and Hermione spoke about the upcoming charity ball. Rose finished her recitation of the day. Her teacher read them a book about a hungry caterpillar. A boy in her class made all their crayons fly up into the air when another boy took the color he wanted. Tansy made peanut butter cookies today. The green dragon on her wall grew a little bit and shot out flames. She kissed him on the cheek, slid off his lap, and left the room in search of Tansy. "How was your day, Draco?" Hermione asked. "Too bloody long," he thought. "Good. I'm going to work from home for the rest of the week, and Theo's coming over. He told me to tell you that he's finally finished all your research and proposals and wants to get started working on the bill with you. Did you have anything going on tomorrow?" "No, but I've been informed to keep Friday clear." "Oh, why?" Draco asked, looking between Hermione and his mother. "We're going on a little shopping excursion," his mother placidly informed Draco. "Wear comfortable shoes," Draco said to Hermione in a loud whisper. Hermione giggled. His mother's little shopping excursions were the worst. He'd gone with her once after her house arrest to keep her company, and it was awful. They'd gone into so many stores he'd lost count. The bags had to be banished to the manor because there were too many to carry. His feet and back ached from walking so much. He'd retreated home and went straight to bed after the day was over and refused to ever go again. "I think I'll go now," his mother said, rising from her chair. "Narcissa, are you sure you won't stay for dinner?" Hermione asked. His mother kissed Hermione on her cheek and then kissed Draco. "No, dears. I'll go say goodbye to Rose. You children enjoy the rest of your evening." She left them sitting in the drawing room, waving them back down when they made to rise to see her out. A short while later, a pop was heard, signifying her departure. Draco turned to Hermione and drank in the sight of her. She was dressed in a white fitted blouse with a blue floral knee-length skirt. Her blue ballet flats were under the coffee table. Her chestnut curls fell over one shoulder. "I missed you today," Draco said, kissing her again. "I missed you too," Hermione said. She cuddled against his chest, and he held her to him, thinking his life couldn't get any more perfect. "I don't think I'm any good," Hermione said, looking nervous and chewing on her lip. It took Draco a minute to process this, as his brain had currently taken up residence in his pants. The segue from making out to having a conversation that required more of a response than the grunt he was currently capable of threw him off balance. Brain function returned to its normal state and location, and he was able to give her a confused, "What?" "Having sex. I don't think I'm any good at it." Hermione was still looking anxious, like she expected him to bolt for the door at the statement. He wanted to laugh at the ridiculousness of her words. Where in the hell would she get an idea like that? He kept in the bark of laughter, because he knew she would think he was laughing at her. "Lioness, I can tell you one thing right now, and that is there is no way that you are bad at sex," he reassured her. "How do you know? We haven't had sex yet." "Because up until a minute ago you were rolling your hips across my dick like you wanted to ride me, because if I rubbed my hand across your knickers, I know I'd find them wet," he thought to himself. How had the woman even been able to have a coherent thought running around in that brain of hers? "I just know. Why would you think you're bad?" "Well, my husband did cheat on me for 12 years. Draco scoffed at the statement. Weasley's never been known for his keen, intelligent mind. As much as I'm going to hate hearing about this, I think you should probably tell me a little about your sex life with the weasel. He set Hermione on the couch beside him. He couldn't think properly with her sitting on his lap, especially with her skirt riding up around her legs. He kept a hold of her hand so that she wouldn't think he was rejecting her. He adjusted himself into a more comfortable position as he turned to face her on the couch. She was looking down at their joined hands in her lap and curling her free hand into the fabric of her skirt. Draco tipped her chin up so that she was forced to look into his eyes. "Hey, just tell me whatever you're comfortable with. What was it like in the beginning? You lost your virginity to him." Hermione took a deep breath and looked away from him to stare at the flames in the fireplace. "Yes, he was my first. I don't think I was his. I have a feeling it was lavender during 6th year. The first time was awful. It hurt and I cried. After that it was pleasant enough, not very frequent." Pleasant enough? Not really an emotion that one would say about enjoyable sexual experiences. "Have you ever had an orgasm, Hermione?" Draco asked. "Yes, not with Ron." "So, masturbation then," Draco said bluntly, knowing she hadn't cheated on Weasley. Hermione nodded. "Lioness, none of that is any indication that you're not good in bed. It is a good indication that Weasley didn't know what he was doing or wasn't interested in seeing to your needs. Why are you worried about it?" "We haven't had sex yet," she stated again. "I'm very well aware of that. Just the thought of sinking into her warm, wet heat. Focus, Draco. Our relationship has never really progressed along the lines of a normal courtship. I haven't tried taking you to my bed yet because I want you to be sure that's where you want to be. You need to know that it's not just your body that I want, and to be clear, I really want your body. But I want so much more. I want your mind and your heart and your soul. I want everything that is Hermione Granger. You already have everything that is Draco Malfoy. Mind, body, heart, and soul. It's all yours and always will be. So why haven't we had sex yet? Because I want it to be special for us. Because you deserve special. Especially now, after he found out that she'd never had special." Hermione's look of dumbfounded speechlessness was enough to make him grin. He'd rendered the great Hermione Granger speechless. She caught his grin and rose up over him, pushing him down onto the couch. He drew his leg up onto the couch, and she straddled him once more. He let his hands wander freely over her as she resumed the heated snog she'd interrupted earlier, as if she'd never stopped to doubt whether she'd be wanted in his bed. "You haven't told me about your own sexual experiences," Hermione said. Well, at least they weren't snogging when she decided to bring that up. He'd been expecting the question. His prying into her sex life deserved reciprocation. Draco set his book down and drew her feet into his lap. Hermione stretched out over the other side of the sofa and got comfortable. "What would you like to know?" he said. She took a fortifying sip of her scotch before answering. "Well, I guess starting at the beginning would be good. Who was your first, and how old were you?" "You haven't been talking to Daphne and Tracy about this, have you?" he asked suspiciously. His first sexual experience was not something he was really proud of, or liked to talk about, but he knew those girls liked to talk. "No? Why? Should I?" "Please don't," Draco practically begged. "I'll tell you. I was 15, and it was with Pansy. We both decided on mutual deflowering during the summer between 4th and 5th year. It was not a great experience for either one of us, and it was not repeated. Well, I thought it was great at first, but then it became a terribly embarrassing experience." "Why was it so bad?" Hermione persisted. She had a slight smile playing across her lips, clearly amused. But her cheeks were tinged a nice rosy color from the alcohol and sex talk. 15-year-old boys are not known for their self-control or concern for their partner's needs. I was overeager and a fumbling idiot in general, and I rushed the process. I pretty much lasted about 2 minutes and strutted about like I was some sort of sex god afterward. Then Pansy told all of her girlfriends about the experience, who then told their boyfriends, who then started teasing me about my less-than-stellar performance. "I take it that's not an issue anymore." "Care to find out?" he teased. "Not if you're only going to last 2 minutes," she quipped impishly. "That's not an issue anymore. It hasn't really been an issue since 5th year. A 7th-year girl from Slytherin took pity on me and became like a sex tutor, I guess you would call it, and I studied very hard." Hermione burst out laughing at his bad joke. "Why would she do that?" Hermione asked. "I thought pure-blood girls were supposed to be pure and wait for marriage." "Slytherins look out for their own, and no, discreet is more like it. She said it would be a shame to look like I did and be terrible in bed." He smirked at her as he said the last part. Hermione threw a pillow at him, laughing. Yes, a terrible shame to all womankind, I'm sure. So what about after Astoria? She asked. Draco took a sip of his scotch before he answered her, savoring the rich, smoky flavor. It was probably close to 2 years after Astoria died before I had any interest in women. I've had a few casual sex partners over the years. Never anything serious. Never any girlfriends. Until me, Hermione said. Yes, Lioness. You were and are the only one that would ever be worth it. Come here, Hermione said, crooking her finger at him. Draco put a knee in the couch and scooted forward until he loomed over her. She put her slim hand up to cup his face and said, I'm so glad it was you that day on the platform. That you've been the one there for me every time I've needed you. Draco leaned down and gently pressed his lips to hers. Always. You sound like your godfather. I'll need to tell Scorpius about the bracelet when he comes home for Christmas. Hermione set down the book she'd been frowning over all evening. Malfoy, a history. Of course you should. But you know the effects of the cuff won't take place until he's 17. Why rush to tell him? I think it's best that he knows about it from early on. This is something I should have grown up knowing. I'm frustrated that I didn't. I keep fantasizing about how things could have been so different for us if I'd known. How things could have been different if he hadn't been such a prat. What have you been fantasizing about? What would have been different for us? She asked quietly. Draco stretched out on the couch so that he was lying on his side beside her. Her head was pillowed on his arm. His back was leaning against the back of the couch. He leaned down to start whispering the fantasies he imagined for them in her ear. Her eyes drifted shut. That first day on the train, I would have greeted you properly, he whispered quietly, taking her free hand in his and kissing her knuckles. I would have felt the pull of you from the first time you walked into that compartment with your big, bushy hair and your beautiful chocolate-brown eyes, and I would have known right then and there who you were to me. I would have been your first real friend at Hogwarts. Maybe we both go into Ravenclaw together. I would have written to my parents telling them that I'd found the one, and told them all I knew about you. My mother would cry and be overjoyed. My father would initially be disappointed because you were a Muggle-born, but would come around in a few months. You and your family would have been invited to spend part of the Christmas holidays and summer vacations with us after that. Draco kept looking down at Hermione. Her eyes still closed, and there was a small smile on her face. When we were older, he continued, I would have kissed you for the first time. He leaned down and placed a soft kiss on her lips, almost chaste like the one he would have given her. Where? She asked softly. He was pleased that she was joining in on the fantasy. At the lake, because we like to take walks there before dinner. I would have asked you to be my girlfriend. We would have gone to the Quidditch World Cup together before 4th year. The Muggle baiting wouldn't have happened. I would have asked you to go to the Yule Ball with me and got to admire you in your periwinkle gown. He twirled a lock of her hair around his finger. You were always beautiful to me from that first day on that train. Seeing you in your gown with your hair tamed and arranged so that part of it was falling over your shoulder, I would have blurted out how much I was in love with you. You would smile at me and tell me you loved me too. We would have danced, kissed, laughed, and partied the night away. When darkness returned, we would have stood together. My father wouldn't rejoin Voldemort because he had to protect you and your family. I wouldn't take the dark mark. He ran his hand over the scar on her arm. You wouldn't bear the scars from my crazy aunt. After he was defeated, we would have returned to school to finish. On my 17th birthday, we would kiss and you would know what to expect, because we would talk so much about the cuff over the years. We would have fallen asleep on the couch in my sitting room, because we tried staying awake to watch it appear. In the morning, we would wake up to find the cuff there. My mother would start crying again, and father would smile a little bit, but secretly be really happy. We would go back to school and show everyone the cuff, and no one would be surprised, because they always thought we were meant to be together. You would be head girl, and I would be head boy, and we would get our first taste of what living together would be like. You would get mad at me because I was incapable of picking up after myself. I would get mad at you because your cat liked to sleep on my robes and get them covered in cat hair. We would have made love for the first time one night. I would slowly take your clothes off, kissing you, making sure you were ready, Draco said against her ear, the quiet whisper of his breath sending chills through Hermione. I would have been so nervous, shaking like a leaf inside. Once I got you naked, I would have lain you down on my bed and marveled at how beautiful you are. I would have explored every inch of you with my hands and mouth, worshipping your body with my own. I would have gone slow, terrified of hurting you. It would have been sweet and wonderful. Maybe I would have fumbled around a little bit in my nervousness, but it wouldn't really matter to either of us because it was perfect, because it was with each other and we loved one another. After we graduated, we would have taken the train back to London one last time. I would have taken you to the compartment we first met and run off like little first years sitting in there. You would be exasperated at me for terrifying them and not really understanding why we had to come to that compartment when all of our friends were celebrating in another part of the train. I would get down on one knee with my grandmother's ring and ask you to marry me right there where it all began. You would cry and say yes, and after we kissed we would run back to where our friends were partying and tell them the good news. Our mothers would team up to plan the wedding and drive you crazy with all the fuss. We would get married in the gardens at Malfoy Manor. I would see you for the first time in your wedding dress when you appeared at the end of the aisle, and I would think you were the most beautiful woman I had ever met. But then you always were. We would escape our wedding reception early to go on our honeymoon, someplace tropical with a beach. We would make love that first time in a bed surrounded by candles with the breeze from the ocean drifting in through the windows, and it would be slow and sweet like our first time. But after that first time, we'd start fucking like rabbits again. We'd stop wearing our clothes because there would be no point. I'd make love to you in the ocean and on the beach and up against every wall and flat surface in the beach house. He watched as Hermione's cheeks flushed with desire. Her breath was coming in shallow pants and her thighs were pressed together. He knew if he touched her now, he would hear her moan. The temptation was so great, but he didn't want to break the spell. You would come home knowing that you were pregnant already, because you always knew everything first. I'd be so happy watching you swell with our first child. Draco set his palm across the curve of her belly, that place where she'd carried her own daughters. She set her hand over his. First, she asked. Draco twined his hand with hers across her midriff. Yes, first. I would try to convince you that we needed 7, enough for our own Quidditch team. You would think 3 was enough. We would compromise on 4, but the 4th pregnancy would end up being twins, and we would get 5. 3 boys and 2 girls. I would go to bed every night exhausted but so blissfully happy that I couldn't believe how amazing my life was. Hermione brushed a tear from her eye and reached up to draw him down to her. Draco kissed her heatedly. She pushed him back a little to look at him, her hand caressing his face and running through his hair. Those beautiful eyes of hers glimmered like molten chocolate pools from unshed tears. Draco, it's a beautiful fantasy, and a part of me wishes it could have happened. As wonderful as it is, though, we can't dwell on it. We've got beautiful children that wouldn't be here without both of us each making the choices we did. We've got wonderful friends that we may not have had. We've finally found each other, and while we may both wish it hadn't taken so long, or been filled with so much sorrow and pain, the paths we've both walked have made us who we are today. We're making our own reality, and it's beautiful. I'm so glad for what this cuff means, and how it ties us together, she continued. I'm glad that you always felt something, because I always did as well. I could never understand why I felt such a strong pull towards you, or the crush I had on you that I never understood and never really went away. Seeing the cuff made me realize why I didn't mourn the end of my marriage more. I was never supposed to be with him. It was always supposed to be you. He didn't think he could love her any more than he already did, but in that moment. The paths they both walked to get themselves to this moment where they could be together might have been different, but as long as the path was always to her, he would have gladly walked it all over again. So it's okay if we tell Scorpius? He asked. Of course. It was always going to be okay that we tell Scorpius. I just wanted to know why you wanted it to be so soon. I was thinking you were going to say it was because of a girl or something. Draco went still beside her. He hadn't even thought of that. And then some things about Scorpius suddenly made sense. What is it, Draco? Hermione asked. Draco grinned down at Hermione, overjoyed with happiness for his son. I think there might be a girl.